There's not a human on the planet who hasn't experienced pain. In fact, it's one of our key life-saving signals. However, when so many people suffer from daily chronic pain, it can be a life-draining experience. Dr. David Schechter is a world-renowned expert on pain, and his book, Think Away Your Pain, may provide many with a life-altering transformation.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by Sam Ash Music, a proud sponsor of Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick. Sam Ash has been serving musicians since 1924. To unlock your inner musician, information is available at samash.com.
Dr. Schechter, it is a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure being here as well.
Well, I want to begin with these words. You say you wrote this book because in this world there is too much needless suffering from pain and too many answers when patients and doctors do not always ask the correct questions.
And there really are a lot of people suffering from pain. What we call chronic pain means that the pain has lasted more than 6 months. And these individuals have tried conventional and alternative medicine and often not found the answer to their problem. What I find is that I ask a different set of questions. The questions are about their stresses in their life, their emotional status, their personality, their childhood. And by opening up the discussion to a broader arena of questions, I can get a different diagnosis and a different set of answers that leads me to a different type of therapeutic approach to the problem.
Well, that's what you say, in fact, because most doctors who don't do that, in a sense, they're actually asking the wrong questions because they're asking about the specific element. Now, and by the way, you're very clear to let us know that, wait, sometimes there's an acute pain. You break a leg, you're not going to think away the pain. You better get it set, you know what I mean? But there's many pains that, and in fact, you even say even that could also have some, if your mindset's different, like you gave an example of an athlete who broke a leg versus an individual, there's a regular lay person will say, they have sometimes even different mindsets that help that pain and healing.
Well, there's athletes who have broken a bone in the Super Bowl and were not diagnosed until after the game. They kept running. And so this also occurs during combat, where people are able to do incredible things with the rush of adrenaline and the emotional state of I've got to survive, I've got to help my buddies survive. So everyone kind of acknowledges that the emotions play a role in our perception of pain and our experience of pain. But the question is, how do we use that in a way to help the ordinary person who's suffering from pain? As you mentioned, there are people who have just a structural issue, and I make a structural or a chemical diagnosis in my office for their problem. Let's say a herniated disc squeezing a nerve where they have a weak foot. On the other hand, there's many people who come in with pain that has not been clearly diagnosed. And that's where I often spend more time with them and find that the issues relate more to their personality, their childhood experiences, stresses at work, stresses at home, rather than the physical area that the pain is manifesting itself in.
In fact, you just mentioned the bulging disc. The truth of the matter is almost, if you took x-rays of almost anyone's back, they all have bulging discs, and yet some of them do not cause pain, some of them do, and it's not necessarily a surgical procedure that's going to help it.
Exactly. The key thing is that the type of imaging that we have now in 2017 is so good that it finds things that nobody even knew was present in the body before. But studies have shown that bulging discs, and I'm making a distinction now between a bulge and a herniated disc pushing on a nerve, that bulging discs are basically a normal part of aging. It's like gray hair of the spine, and people's gray hair doesn't hurt. And in the spine, it doesn't hurt either. So that's what we're talking about, is that the discs in many people are not significant.
But this is the part I want to be careful of, and Doc, I know you have the right explanation. When we talk about thinking away your pain, my only concern is that it would seem that people could feel very guilty if they can't think away their pain. How do you advise all of us that that's not what you're talking about? Because I know it's not from reading the book, but even the when you say think away your pain, well, wait a minute. If the doctor says I can think away my pain and I can't, then I'm causing my pain. How do you make that distinction? You do so in the book, but I thought explaining it to the viewers would be very important.
It's very important not to think of the person with pain as creating their own problem. And one could misunderstand this concept of pain being due to both psychological and physiological factors as, well, it's your fault that this is going on. That's not what we're looking about here. We're looking at how to get solutions. We're looking at how to take people forward with an issue. And we all have our personality quirks. And so and most of the doctors I've talked to are perfectionists. Yet perfectionism is one of the risk factors for chronic pain, as is being too hard on yourself. And these are common characteristics. In fact, many of the characteristics that are risk factors in my experience for chronic illness or chronic pain can lead you to be a person that is envious, desirable in your community, that is upstanding citizen, has a high integrity. But at the same time, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. And so the pressure you put on yourself can be manifested as a physical condition.
I thought one of the great ones was goodism. Mm-hmm. When you try to be too good, or you not try, let's put it this way, your human nature is just that. You're so good, you're so kind, you're so empathetic, you're in a sense vulnerable to causing this pain. And again, like you said, you're not going to blame that person for this, but in a sense, as in your practice, you've noticed that happening.
Right. And that's well put, is that some people have certain vulnerabilities, and goodism is a concept where people take the world on their shoulders, things that bother them in the environment or politically, or with family members. They're very highly responsible. They take care of others. And as a result of doing that, and these are all good things, these are wonderful things. You want to have these type of people in your life. But putting all that pressure on oneself can lead to physical pains, can lead to physical conditions not getting better as they would normally do so.
You say the most important realization in the healing process is recognizing that your mind can both hurt you and cure you. It is the ultimate double-edged sword, isn't it?
It sure is. The mind gets us into traps. It gets us stuck in situations, etc. But with the right guidance, with learning about this condition we call TMS, you can get yourself out of these traps. So it is a double-edged sword.
You say, though, the first step, though, is to, when you're reading this book, do so with an open mind.
Absolutely. And openness can sometimes occur after a period of resistance. So many people have said to me, I was given this book about a year ago. It could be my book or preceding books in the subject material. And it just didn't seem to apply to me, so I put it on the shelf. And you know what? Last week I picked it up and I realized this is exactly what I've got. What changed in that time? I don't know. I called your secretary and I desperately pleaded to get in an appointment as soon as I can to see you. And here they are seeing me in the office a week later or 10 days or whatever. And what had changed? Somehow they became open. Sometimes desperation leads to openness. When nothing else has helped, you might become more open. Or you might hear a story on television of someone who tried a different type of approach and got better. So you say, you know what, I'll look at this in a different way than I have before.
And you're also very clear to let us know that pain is actually what keeps us alive. In other words, it is the ultimate in the human existence, because when we feel pain, we know not to touch the hot stove. We know not to go near the saber-toothed tiger back in the days. We know so pain is a positive thing. It's just, as you say, though, when it becomes chronic, when there's almost nothing there, and yet you're suffering from pain. And when I say nothing there, again, I want to be careful. We're not talking about it being your fault or it being some internal thing, but for all intents and purposes, the pain is there and it's not specifically related to an injury.
It's real pain, it's not imaginary, but it's not going to get better by continuing to treat the area where you're hurt. It's going to get better by looking at the most complicated structure we know of in the universe, which is the human nervous system, the brain, the trillions of connections in the human brain, and how we can impact upon those by what we think about and how we go about our lives in terms of emotional processing. And I have some things I can say about that. That's the way forward.
I'm not going to let you leave it. You have some things to say about emotional processing. Say them.
Okay. So we take someone who's in chronic pain and we say to them, we need you to begin to connect with your emotions in a different way. And so we have them journal. We find that writing about your feelings for about 10 or 15 minutes a day in a notebook or a workbook is a great tool for expressing yourself, becoming aware of how you feel about things, and just releasing some of that stress and tension. And that's one of the key things that we use to help people get out of pain.
Something that part of it seems obvious, the other part didn't. Being more flexible. Physically, we all know flexibility helps, but emotionally, that's the real key that you're going after. I know you want us to stretch and do all those things if you have bad back pain or whatnot, but the truth is, can you be flexible in your emotions? And my God, aren't they the hardest things to get a hold of?
They really are. And yet, again, with looking at pain, this essential aspect of the human condition as a signal that something needs to change, a signal that a person needs to look at things in a little different way, that's hopefully the force that propels a person forward to become more flexible, to change, if you will, to open themselves up, to be looking at other diagnostic approaches, etc.
Well, I think the first thing that is important, and I'll use your words exactly because I think it really is this important, to make this realization. You are not a passive player in your pain experience. And there you're clear by saying, forget the part of the pain. The pain may not be anything you have to do with, but you're not a passive player in the experience of that pain.
The medical system often makes patients feel like they are a passive player. They sit in a chair, a doctor examines them, they get a shot, they get a prescription, go pick it up at the pharmacy. My approach is different. My approach is to talk to the patient, get them to understand the condition, and get them to participate, in fact, be the key force moving forward in healing their condition. I'm a guide and I'm a teacher. I'm explaining them how to get to the healing path, but they're ultimately walking down that healing path themselves.
Well, you say that path, in fact, is a two-way street. You use this. The signals are, actually, those are the exact words, a two-way street. They go from north to the brain and south to the body. And I'm also a firm believer that not only are you using your mind, but you do need to listen to your body. Let your body actually sometimes tell you what your head should be thinking. I find that north-south route, people forget that. Even when we're dealing with a book, Think Away Your Pain, the point of the matter is it is a north-south thing. If you listen to your body, if you're more in tune with all the little idiosyncrasies, you have a better chance of A, letting it go to your mind and letting your mind take care of your body.
There's some things you want to listen to and there's some things you want to ignore. If you're experiencing a pain in your low back and you've had all the tests and you've had all the treatments, you've had all the evaluations, and they tell you there's nothing seriously wrong here, and you come in to see someone like myself or perhaps another physician who says this is a muscular problem, you don't have to worry about it, well, the solution actually becomes to ignore it, to get out and go for a walk, maybe hit some tennis balls, maybe go for a swim. So awareness of your body can lead you to then mentally say, you know what, I don't need to listen to this signal anymore. In some ways, chronic pain is a person paying too much attention to nervous signals that no longer are important. They're old news. We can forget about them now.
But you also, the old classic term, psychosomatic. I know, I wanted you to cringe because I wanted you to clear that up. I mean, you do so beautifully in the book, so if you don't do it here, that's fine. But come on, give us it, because it was so important.
That's a term that people struggle with, because the term psychosomatic has some type of an implication in our culture that you're faking it, that you're malingering, or that you're a psycho in some way. And that's not what the term means. The term is connecting psyche, the mind, and soma, the body, from the Greek. And therefore, almost everything in life is psychosomatic, because things affect the body's affected by both your mind, how you're feeling, your emotional status, etc., and what you ate, what you did that day, etc. So everything's really psychosomatic, but the term has a lot of negative connotations.
Also, you're very clear to let us know that even if, and there are 7 lessons, even though we're not speaking of the 7 lessons directly, we're hitting them as we're going. But I'll just use your words again, because again, I think when we're dealing with mind body, I want to make it real clear so people don't feel wrong. Pain relief is not a straight line course. It is more jagged, like a lightning bolt in shape with ups and downs. So even when you master something, and I think this is something I always want people to get, you never really master it in that sense. You're always continuously learning. So even with your methods and principles, it is always, there's a learning curve. Sometimes you'll slip back and you won't even know why. And by the way, that goes in life in general. So it's important though for people to know that it's not always this way. It's always going to have that up and down scoop.
Anyone who's learned to play a musical instrument or learned a new sport also finds that you get better for a while, and then you may have a couple of bad days or a bad week, and then you get better again, etc. The opposite direction now when I'm thinking of pain, because I'm thinking of training a sport as going upwards, and I'm thinking of pain as starting out high and going down. But it doesn't tend to be a straight line. My patients who improve tend to get better for a little while. They may have a bad day or two, and I just explained to them that's a normal part of how the nervous system is working this all out. And then you get better again, and gradually your pain is hopefully dissipating and going way down to 0 as the goal.
You actually have it separated out, so I want to bring this up. Inflammation. Because inflammation is almost at the essence of all pain. I know that's, to a certain extent, something's inflamed. Something is annoying you. Something is digging into you. Something is inflamed. That is what causes all forms of pain to some extent.
Well, not all forms.
No,
but
I know, but that's why I want to be careful.
Yeah.
I meant, though, but it is a common thing, and I think more so now than ever, that we have inflamed personalities, maybe. I don't know.
There you go. I think at some point the pain switches from the inflamed joint to the inflamed personality. Inflammation, which is in Latin, tumor, rubor, dolor, and color, refers to swelling, warmth, redness, and heat. And that's more of the acute process. That's the acute sprained knee or the sprained ankle that's inflamed, maybe even the sprained back. But as things go along, the inflammation goes away, but it still hurts. And that's really the kind of patient that I'm dealing with in that regard, whereas the inflammation person, the more acute person, maybe they need to put ice pack on, they need to take ibuprofen, they need to change their diet, etc. Conditions like gout that are very inflammatory are not conditions that I would think away. I would tend to treat them more medically speaking. They're more chemically based.
In a way, if you can just break it for even a moment, I mean, that's what cortisone does for the most part, if it works. You can break that cycle of pain. And again, we're not talking about thinking it, but if you can do it via your mind or this process, but it is the cycle of it that you want to try to disrupt.
That's very true. And I use a metaphor of a cloudy day. Somebody with chronic pain who has it all the time, and some of my patients unfortunately have it all the time, every day feels like a cloudy day to them. So I say to them, what we're trying to do now is we're trying to have the sun break out just for a little bit every day or a couple of times a day, meaning a little bit of blue sky in amidst of those clouds. And if you can do that using your mind and using these techniques that I teach in the book and in my office, then we hopefully can gradually have each day moving forward have more of the blue sky breakthrough and eventually have a clear day, meaning no pain. So this is a challenge for someone who's really been stuck in chronic pain for a long time, but this metaphor sometimes helps them.
These were the words that I found, to me personally, to be the most stirring. I want to share them with you and my viewers. Changing the fear response to an I understand and I am in control response. That there, in my opinion, is the key, because fear is in back of that limbic part of the mind even. You can't even think that away because that's what the lizards even have. So the ability, though, to say a response to it is, I understand and I am in control, is that not the keystone to almost this whole thing?
Pain is very scary, and it hits us at a very deep level, as you say, at an emotional level, a limbic, amygdala level of the brain. But we also have a cortex. We have our human brain. And our human brain can do some calming and soothing of that lizard brain and say to ourselves, once we understand and believe this, I'm going to be okay. I'm actually healthy. I'm strong. I'm improving. And I have control over this. And those are, in fact, some of the key messages that I teach people to say to themselves and teach themselves, and that leads to their improvement.
Now, that's just what I was going to talk about, is just that, self-talk. Because you don't, and I even tell people there's physical manifestations. I tell them, do you know that if you actually smile, you will become happier? Mm-hmm. There's a connection between the physical and that, and the same thing is what we're talking about here. Become aware of that connection, and you'll be amazed at whether it even relieves pain. You'll be amazed at just in general, the awareness that you have will make you feel better.
I tell people that you're going to be able to break your pain down and reduce it by thinking certain positive thoughts about this, about I'm getting better, there's nothing seriously wrong with me, I can improve. And the first time it happens to them and the pain starts to dissipate from these self-talk messages, they think it's magic. But it's really not magic, it's just how the brain works, it's how the nervous system works. As you mentioned, smiling repeatedly has been shown in studies to make you feel better. And it's not the other way around. It's not that feeling better makes you smile more. That may be true as well. But actually forcing yourself to smile on a sad day makes you feel better. And so when you start putting new words into your brain, not I'm always going to have this pain, or I'm stuck in this pain, or I'm never going to get better, but rather I'm improving. I have control over this. I'm healthy. These new messages go in there and they become like new software that changes your brain.
And you know what I got out of the book is that I took it even out of pain. If you actually substitute anything for that word pain, it'll work. I know that sounds kind of funny, but there's something about this connectivity that if you can experience it, even if you have no pain, just by experiencing this better connection between yourself, your mind, your world, your environment, your everything, you become less of a victim. And that's another message here, is the victimization of pain. And victims, in a weird way, are almost dangerous, not just to themselves, but to society, because if you feel victimized, then you have no control. You feel that you're blamed. And yet, as I said carefully, I don't want to blame anyone, but I do want people to feel not so victimized. And I think that's a large part of this message as well.
Well, as you said, we're stuck in a very busy world and we're constantly going. And this book and its message is to just take a step back and think and listen to yourself and write about your feelings and connect that to your health. And I find that people feel better when they do that.
But yet, you still say it sometimes takes that last straw. Isn't that right? Before they'll even come to you, pick up the book, or think that way. It's like, why is it just in our human nature that we are so resistant to this type of thing?
It seems that many people are resistant to looking at something, quote, psychologically rather than purely physically. In some way, it feels like it's a weakness, but it's not. It's really more of a strength. It's really more of a willingness to broaden your mind rather than narrow it. But it does seem like there's resistance in a lot of cases.
Insight and awareness. That is really what we are talking about here. We're talking about you developing, not you personally, but the viewers, ourselves, the individual, being open to the fact that there is insights that you can get and awarenesses that may already exist and you're just not seeing it.
That's really what we're talking about here. And I find that the writing and the journaling does it. Thinking, of course, helpful as well. But sitting down and writing, it's amazing the connections that come up. And you don't have to be a writer. You don't have to be good at it. It doesn't have to be grammatical. It's just about putting a pen onto paper and just expressing yourself.
Doc, I just want to thank you so much for your insight and awareness and sharing it with us today. Thank you, my friend.
You're very welcome.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for joining us. Now, before the doctor leaves, I'd like to leave you with these words from Think Away Your Pain. It is time to reconnect the mind and body, which have only recently, in a historical sense, been split apart in our Western conception of health and disease. I'm Barry Kibrick. There is no doubt that a connection exists between the mind and the body. The key is to understand how that connection affects your health. Thank you so much, Doctor.
To connect with Barry, like him on Facebook and follow him on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, view past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his weekly blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com. Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by Sam Ash Music, a proud sponsor of Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick. Sam Ash has been serving musicians since 1924. To unlock your inner musician, information is available at samash.com.